Okay, let's unpack this. Today, we're embarking on a deep dive into the biblical book of First Timothy. This is that really powerful letter from the Apostle Paul to Timothy, his mentee. And the context is, well, Paul's just been freed from house arrest in Rome. He's got this fresh clarity,
Yeah.
about how vital the church is and how critical it is to get its foundation right.
Exactly. And that's really our mission for this discussion, trying to grasp Paul's core purpose in writing what we call a pastoral epistle. It's basically guidance for a leader, for Timothy, on practical church matters. And what's fascinating, I think, is how Paul is trying to prevent the church from getting, well, sidetracked by purely human ideas.
Yeah.
He wants it to be a community that's genuinely led by God's own intention.
That's right. And Paul's initial messages to Timothy, they're incredibly clear, aren't they? First, he really emphasizes preserving the core truth, the orthodox doctrine, against false teachers. That's all through chapter 1. Then he moves straight into setting up the church leadership, properly qualified elders and deacons. And he stresses, interestingly, the importance of prayer, especially, he says, for those in high positions. Why that focus?
Well, that instruction to pray for rulers and authorities, aiming for peaceful and quiet lives, it reveals Paul's vision. He wants a society where faith can actually flourish freely. It ties into the idea that good societal order allows the gospel message to spread. It's quite a contrast to systems where, human rule becomes oppressive. It really highlights God's will, from Paul's view, for a society with genuine freedom.
Okay. And this brings us to a point that often causes, well, a lot of debate. Paul's instructions about women, specifically in 1 Timothy 2, verses 9 and 10.
Right.
It's so often misunderstood, maybe even seen as discriminatory. But that's not really Paul's aim here, is it?
No, not at all, really. To get his intention, you absolutely have to consider the cultural backdrop. We're talking an extremely patriarchal society.
Right.
Women often had very few rights, almost like property. So Paul's advice here, it was fundamentally about maintaining order in public worship. That was the key, not silencing women.
Order. Okay.
Yeah, and what's really telling is that just before that, in verse 8, he tells the men not to be angry or quarrelsome in the gatherings, which was crucial because the early church, it was this mix, right? Jewish Christians, Gentile Christians. They had deep cultural, traditional, even spiritual differences that often flared up and caused disruptions.
Like that story you sometimes mention about the holiday clashes.
Exactly. It makes me think of that situation in Australia, where some churches decided to celebrate Christmas in July, others stuck to December. Seems small, maybe, but it shows how these cultural things can cause, well, real friction if not handled carefully. Paul saw similar, probably much more intense issues causing disorder. So when Paul then advises women on modest dress and demeanor, he says, in like manner, it's linked to the advice for men. The goal is the same, order, not restriction based on gender.
Ah, so it's parallel advice.
Precisely. Paul's focus wasn't gender. It was orderly worship, so the gospel could be heard clearly. He actually corrects the men first for the potentially disruptive behavior. And remember, Paul consistently worked alongside many women. His core message aligns with God's kingdom values: equality, fairness, human rights, freedom. This was radical stuff, directly challenging the extreme gender discrimination common then. You see reflections of that discrimination in some ancient texts outside the Bible, sadly. Women were active in the church, definitely, but maybe their assertiveness, seen through that era's cultural lens, could sometimes be perceived as disruptive, hindering the mission. Paul wanted a healthy, mission-focused church, free from unnecessary disorder.
Okay, that provides a lot of context. So zooming out then, as Paul goes on in chapters 3 through 6, he's looking at the overall health of the church. What does all this mean for us today, trying to build resilient communities?
Well, it connects to this broader principle Paul lays out. Choosing leaders, choosing co-workers based on a genuine desire to follow God. People who show initiative, who are committed to living by the value of the word, especially in their closest relationships, like their family life. Paul seems to see the church less like a 100-meter dash, an individual sprint, and more like a three-legged race or maybe a spiritual marathon. Unity is absolutely key, moving forward together.
Together, yeah.
And conflict, interestingly, isn't necessarily the enemy. It's almost a natural thing that happens when people try to get closer, build real relationships. It's part of deepening trust and working towards a shared goal. Think of sports team hashing out strategy. Disagreement isn't failure. It can build strength if handled right.
That's a really helpful way to frame it. So for you listening, as you think about your own roles, maybe in your church, your family, your work, are you leaning towards just comfort? Or are you actively working towards God's purposes, God's mission, even when that means navigating that sometimes necessary conflict?
Yeah, and maybe a final thought to chew on. Paul's advice to Timothy, it really highlights how important honest feedback is in any meaningful relationship. Like a parent guiding a child. Giving and receiving that correct feedback, even when it feels like conflict, addressing those blind spots, that's actually essential for trust to grow, for moving forward together towards a purpose. And that kind of unity, built on honesty and shared direction, seems absolutely central to Paul's vision for the church.